Welcome back, everybody. No problem, man. That was especially for you, Marcus. That welcome back was for you. This is the Temple Daily Telegram Sports Podcast, Week 9 of the high school football season.
Already?
I know. Or, yeah. I kind of wish it was Week 11, only because, the playoffs are so exciting, and it's also closer to Christmas, which is my favorite time of the year.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes. What happens when you're not having fun?
I don't know.
You're listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Sorry.
Josh Weaver with Daniel Zepeda.
What's up?
Greg Willie.
Hello.
And Marcus Hood, who's already contributed
Howdy.
something. We have teams that have clinched playoff spots. We have teams that can clinch playoff spots. And we'll talk about all of that.
A lot of clenching going on.
Yes, a lot of clinching.
Yes.
So that we will discuss. We'll talk about Troy's big win last week over Rockdale to take sole possession of first place in 10-3A1, which will segue into discussion of the Rockdale-Cameron-Yo rivalry game.
Is that a big one?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
We can also talk about Temple, playoff-bound Temple, and now in first place alone Temple. We'll talk about Belton's fading playoff hopes. They still have a chance, but those chances are growing slimmer by the week. So a lot to get to.
Just win, baby.
Yes. A lot to get to in this podcast. So, coming up Thursday night in District 12-6A, Hewitt Midway at Killeen Shoemaker. Both teams are 4-1 in district, so that'll be a big one. I'm reading the wrong spot. Waco at Temple, Killeen Ellison at Belton, and Coppers Cove at Harker Heights, which is a big one for Heights and for Belton as well, and their playoff implications there. In District 8-4A2, Madisonville at Salado. The Eagles keep doing themselves some favors, winning 2 in a row, including last week. In 10-3A1, Gerald at Academy, Cameron-Yo at Rockdale, as I mentioned, and Troy at Manor New Tech. In 8-3A2, Lexington at Rogers. Lexington didn't win a game in non-district and has now won 2 straight in district, going up against Rogers, still undefeated. So that'll be a big one. In 8-2A1, Bruceville Eddy at Moody. In 13-2A1, Thrall at Rosebud Lot. In 13-2A2, Bartlett at Granger, another rivalry game there. I think this is the 91st edition of that one, so that goes back a long way. In District 14-1A2, McDade at Buckholtz. Buckholtz has won a couple in a row now. In TAP's 6-man Division 2, District 2, Holy Trinity Catholic at Kerrville, Our Lady of the Hills. Do you know anything about them, Dan?
I do. I covered OLH for a little bit there.
Cool.
Good squad, good coach, good fun.
All right. Wonderful.
Imagine if Johnny Mansell had played at that high school.
Oh, man, that's
imagine.
That's all we're going to do. Just imagine.
And in non-district, Central Texas Christian at Dallas First Baptist. Idle this week. Killeen, Gatesville, and playoff-bound Holland. I'd like to throw it over to Marcus real quick.
Oh, okay, great.
Just because he puts together our standings on a weekly basis, and
That's the only reason to throw it over to Mark.
He's bolded a few of our playoff-bound teams, so if you wouldn't mind just going over those real quick, and then which teams can clinch coming up this week, and also, if you can, any teams that might be eliminated.
Well, I can tell you, I haven't looked at everything really closely, but I know Temple, they've clinched a playoff spot. The worst they can do is kind of wind up in a three-way tie for three-way or four-way tie for that final spot, but they have enough points against the teams that they've already played that they would have the tiebreakers if that happens.
Right.
It's unlikely to happen anyway because they're playing Waco this week. So really, if they win, they're pretty much in. That district actually, there is one scenario that I looked at that, depending on how it comes out this week, all the teams can be set for the playoffs in that district. And I think Heights has to win. I can't remember who wins out of the Shoemaker Midway game because I left all of that at my house.
Yeah, you don't have to, just go head first into this.
Right.
I would just,
You'd
just
have
a quick
to drive
glance.
back to Harker Heights to get it.
Yeah.
Now, great. Now people know where I live.
Hey, you could have had Daniel pick it up on his way in from Coppers Cove.
That's now people know where I live. Just keep going, Greg.
Anyway.
Keep going.
It's a geography lesson. People.
There's Troy in District 10-3A clinched the playoff spot last week, and then of course Cameron-Yo and Rockdale will be in position to kind of clinch. I don't know for sure that either one of them can with the win, but I mean, you win that game, you're pretty much going to be in the playoffs more than likely. Rogers, if they win and Chilton beats Florence, Rogers clinches a spot this week.
Okay.
Bruce Valetti's in the playoffs after missing last year, and
Second time in 3 years, though, right?
that is correct. Kyle Shopik's got him back on the right track, 7-1. Still not getting any love in those whatever Dave Campbell's Texas High School, whatever Tepper Step put together out there. Still not getting any love from those guys, but we know they're pretty stout here. Holland, talk about stout. They've clinched the playoff spot, and
They're off this week, and they'll probably still go find someone to go beat up on just for fun.
that's how I spend my off days.
Fight Club over there.
I mean, I don't go to Holland to just find somebody to beat up on, but, I'm kind of scared of a few of those guys, actually. Anyway, and really, as far as teams that can clinch, that's about it. Hey, Buckholz and McDade, they opened district this week. I mean, teams have clinched playoff spots, and we got one district that's just playing their first district games.
Yep.
So,
Hey, it's time to stop playing home schools and play real schools in 6-man here. Let's go.
and I like Buckholz in that game as well.
Great,
I think they're going to go 3 in a row. I know that wasn't on the agenda.
You were right a couple weeks ago.
You're predicting a Buckholz win over Calvert? Is he making the early call?
I'm not.
Oh,
but they're playing McDade this week, so I'm predicting a Buckholz win over McDade.
There you go.
And
Well, thank you, Marcus.
yeah, there's some teams also that probably aren't going to make the playoffs, but we won't really talk about them.
Well, we'll get to that next week once we know
Yeah,
more for
we'll
sure.
we'll have a lot more X's by these standings next week, I'm sure.
Yes.
And other teams will just be X'd out.
Yep. Yep.
We won't do that.
Be a lot of X's.
This podcast is great.
You say that every time, and you're right every time. It is great.
That's why dozens of people listen to our podcast
Yeah.
on a weekly basis.
Oh, dozens. That's
Yeah.
That can be,
All right.
That's many dozens.
12 times 3 or 4.
Yeah. That's a lot.
True. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, whoever you dozens of people are
Yes,
too.
we were
Spread the word.
talking. We were talking before this, Greg, a little bit about Temple and the expectations over there, specifically on defense, and that kind of seems to be a theme as we've gone along in your notebooks. Temple is relatively cruising at this point in 12-6A. They've been rolling opponents, yet what they've given up on defense has been unsatisfactory to head coach Scott Stewart, which has kind of been what he's been pointing out despite some of these lopsided victories.
And he's kind of challenging their, you don't want to really say manhood, but just like their personal pride, because what he saw against Colleen Ellison last week was just a lot of porous defense. Now, granted, all of this happened after Temple was up 35-0 and 43-8 at halftime, so the game was never really in jeopardy for Temple, but he still had his defensive starters out there, and Breezion Spiller, the quarterback, and Demasha Harris, the running back. I mean, they really were carving up Temple's defense as that second half went on. I mean, Ellison scored 30 points in the second half and probably kept those defensive starters on the field a lot longer than Stewart really wanted to leave them out there. But I think at a certain point he was like, I'm not pulling you out until you show that you're playing well enough for me to take you out. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of let them stay out there to get carved up a little bit. And of course it still was a 26-point win, so nothing was ever in doubt. But I think he's appealed to their personal pride, like put something better on film this week. Show that you want to play the game the right way. And he also doesn't want to for Temple to need to score 50, 60, 65 points every week, because eventually you're going to play teams that won't let you do that.
Right.
Whether it's midway or you get in the first or second round of the playoffs. I mean, you might score 40 on somebody, but if you allow 45, your season's over.
Sure.
Kind of like last year against Mesquite Horn. So, the big, rallying cry for Temple right now would be, I think you're rooting for Shoemaker probably to beat Midway, and then you beat Waco, beat Cove. I mean, Temple looks like they're going to be the number 1 seed in Division II, but Midway game will still be big.
Yeah.
Temple did dodge a bullet with Vance Willis, the quarterback. He took a little shot to his lower leg last week and got pulled from the game, but apparently he's a little tender still, but he's really fine to play. So, that would have been a big loss if he had to miss any time, but, they should have no problems with Waco. That's a winless team. They're a apparently improved this year. You look at kind of the scores, the stats; they seem to be better with Kwame Cavill in year 2 there. But this is Temple's homecoming game should be a pretty easy win. But they're definitely looking for a better defensive performance, and then carrying that over to the Midway game because guess what? Temple's never beaten Midway in 5 tries. So even though the matchup favors Temple this year, they've never proven they can beat Midway. So that's still out there.
And we should mention we haven't had a chance to do that yet. I mean, Midway lost last week for the first time, and they had a streak of 37 straight district victories. Their last loss was in 2013 in district, and Harker Heights did the honors last week, 17-14. Which I'm not sure if any of us had Harker Heights
probably
as a team that ended. It looked like it might be happening this year. Midway streak coming to an end. They just haven't been themselves. But
in a way, I'm sure Temple maybe wanted to be the ones to break that streak. But at the same time, Heights beating Midway, and then potentially Shoemaker having a good chance to beat Midway tonight at home. Temple will take that too, because that makes Temple's path to the number 1 seed in Division II a little clearer, because the gorilla out there is Longview.
I think it's anyone in that district.
It's anyone, but it's especially Longview. I mean,
I thought Trent was the gorilla.
yeah, they are. They still are. But
no one heard that, Marcus. You're like 74 feet away from the microphone.
Yeah, it wasn't that funny of a joke.
For any fans looking ahead, if Temple is able to wrap up that number 1 seed in Division II, it looks like either Tyler Lee, which is 5-2 right now, or Mesquite Horn. They're still having nightmares of that Mesquite Horn team. But they're only 2-5 right now, but they were 3-7 last year. So Temple would much rather play a home game in the playoffs than have to go to Longview, Texas. So
we'll see. I mean, essentially, the District 12 6A title and that number 1 seed in Division II is Temple's too. So, they are in the driver's seat for sure at this point. Belton, on the other hand, is not in any sort of driver's seat after losing to Killeen last week pretty handily. It was a flat performance all the way around in a game that they really kind of had to win to make these last 3 a little less stressful. And now, I mean, their climb is to the playoffs is a lot steeper because of that loss last week. And with Killeen Ellison in town for homecoming, it doesn't really get any easier. I guess, Belton, its best chance is to win their next 3. And I guess in this district this year, maybe there's a chance to do that just because we've seen so many goofy results. But Belton's going to be without starting quarterback Ruben Jimenez this week. Sophomore Riley Madden's going to make his first start. The defense has not really been able to stop anybody. So far, they've given up more than 40 points a game. And
good running backs have given Belton's defense some trouble. Going back to the Shoemaker game.
Guys,
Kadarius Marshall from Killeen last week, and Ellison has a really good running back and a good running quarterback.
I mean, it's not going to be easy for Belton. Obviously, in a do or die situation, you want to hope that you rise to the occasion, especially at home on homecoming. But by beating Killeen Ellison Friday night and Heights beating Cove, that guarantees you have to win out. Because Heights would have 5 district wins and Belton only 3 with 2 to go. So stakes are pretty high for the Tigers, who are trying to get to the playoffs for a 6th straight year.
And you're really
at
Waco next week, even though on paper it looks like a win. I mean, it's a Waco team that's been playing marginally better and usually a better team at home. So that's not really just a given win for Belton either this year, I don't think.
Been a little while since they've played on the road at Waco. I know they weren't there last year. It's been a little while. I can't remember when it hasn't been for years. But
you got a strict limit on Bush's chicken tenders so you can get up in the press box there.
But so it's a big week for Belton and really this whole district, as we've kind of talked about. And speaking of big, Troy's victory over Rockdale last week, that was what the Trojans did offensively against Rockdale was pretty impressive. Dan, you were there. Troy now, we talked about driver's seats. They're on their way to that 10-3A1 district title. I know at 4-0 now. And Rockdale now has to go, play Yo. So
Yeah, I mean, thanks for Rock.
Both those things.
Yeah, I mean, Troy, like you said, I mean, they're completely in the driver's seat. That 10-3-A-1 crown is pretty much theirs to lose. They've got they travel to Manor New Tech this week, so on paper should be an easy win for the Trojans. But there's a reason you play the game. So Ronnie Porter, head coach down there at Troy, he's going to have his guys ready to go, and then they finish up with Lago Vista, which will be an interesting one there. That one should really have an impact on, Cameron, Yo, and Rockdale and some of those other teams vying for some of those playoff spots. So that could be one to keep an eye on there in a couple of weeks. Greg, were you going to say something?
Well, I was saying, as we speak, Lago Vista is in second place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
By a half game over Yo and Rockdale. So,
yeah,
I mean,
you got Troy at 4-0, Lago Vista 3-1, and then Yo and Rockdale 2-1, both of them. So Troy just really proven that they just show up. They show up against the premier teams on their schedule. Josh, you were at the Troy Academy game a couple weeks ago, and you just
it was 14-14 at half.
Yeah,
Academy was leading for much of that first half.
Yeah, you just weren't really impressed with what you saw out of the Trojans.
I was just surprised.
Yeah,
because of what they had been doing and what they did previously.
Well, when you hang 59 on Cameron
right, exactly.
Yo Field, that's you expect more.
It was surprising.
Right. And then Troy comes back home and, puts up, 62 against Rockdale. And they hold Rockdale. Doesn't seem like they really held them. They scored 44 points, but you have an offense that had been averaging over 50, a ton of yards a game with that explosive offense. And they were able to get the stops they needed. Sam Jones had a key interception deep in the Tigers' own territory, and immediately on the next play, Zach Hrbacek runs it in for a 17-yard touchdown. So that was a big momentum swing there. Hrbacek, he left the game there for a little bit in the third quarter, I believe. He had a left leg injury, but he was out for maybe like 3 or 4 minutes there, but he was able to return, and he had another, one of his signature games, 227 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. Xavier Hernandez, who's also kind of emerged as another solid running back for the Trojans. He had 180-something yards, I believe, and a touchdown. He really got a lot of that yardage whenever Hrbacek was out of the game. And then Sam Jones, the do-it-all guy for the Trojans on offense, and then also a strong linebacker on defense. He had 4 total touchdowns, 3 rushing, 1 receiving. He also had 113 yards rushing, I believe. So I mean, they really just kind of rode that trio to the win. For Rockdale, Cameron Valdez, he gets a lot of attention, rightfully so. He had over 200 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, so he was hard to stop for the Trojan defense. But really, I mean, Rockdale just couldn't get stops really at all when it came to the Troy offense. The
problem that Yo had.
Exactly.
Troy, right?
Yeah, and with Yo, Troy was able to, take early turnovers and turn them into points. They built that early lead when they opened up district play in Cameron, so that kind of benefited them. They had a couple of key turnovers, but really it was just, Rockdale would start driving, and Troy would just get, especially in the second half, they would get stops on defense. They would force a punt. They would force a 4th down failed conversion, and from there really would get great field position, and just, a couple of plays later, they're in the end zone. So, Rockdale head coach Jeff Miller, he admitted, it wasn't just one guy. It wasn't just Hrbacek that hurt him. It was a bunch of different guys, and he said, they've had an explosive offense all year long, and when they're clicking, it's something to behold. But Troy just made them have way too many negative plays. Too many guys that just they're losing yards on plays. So I think that was the biggest thing. Troy's defense just came up when it needed to, and the offense, just continues to roll. You put up 59 against Cameron. A couple weeks later, you put 62 on Rockdale. So you got to be feeling real good if you're Troy.
Well, and you mentioned coming up with plays when you need to. That was the thing that stood out for Troy in that academy game when the offense, I mean, it still piled up a whole bunch of yards rushing with Herbacek, but, you know, with the offense kind of sputtering in that game, you know, Troy had a return to kickoff for a touchdown and then also had a pick six. So, you know, finding ways to make big plays to set yourself up, to give yourself an advantage. I mean, that's a sign of a team that's, you know, playing well and could build well going forward.
The best teams, like really, if you watch any level of football, they score non-offensive touchdowns.
Yes.
They find ways to pick six, fumble recovery, punt return, kick return.
Yeah.
They do their safeties, you know, whatever. Because, you know, that's the sign of having good athletes who have a nose for the ball and know what to do with it. Is, you know, you get those non-traditional touchdowns, that's what you see Clemson or Alabama or the Patriots, you know, people like that.
Or even if you don't cash in, you know, as far as touchdowns go on defense, but creating those turnovers or pinning teams deep with a punt or something, you know, just those small things that allow your offense to capitalize on.
I think it really favors Troy as far as their schedule goes to end the year on Lago Vista. You know, instead of ending the year on, you know, maybe a Maine or New Tech or maybe a Jarrell, you know, a team that's not having as great of a season. You know, that way, you know, with high schoolers, you never know how they're going to react, how they're going to respond. And that game right before their idle week, which is that very last week of the regular season, right before playoff start, you know, you want a challenge. You want someone who's going to make you play at a high level, and I think Lago Vista has proven that, you know, they're having a real solid year, and, you know, they're a team that you definitely can't take for granted, especially playing on the road there in Lago Vista.
And they might be able to give Herbacek a little bit of a lighter workload this week against Maine or New Tech. I mean, he's been carrying the mail for 2 months now, so it's like if there's 1 week where you can kind of, you know, say, hey, 7 carries and take the rest of the night off, this might be the one. Let him heal up and not expose him to too much risk. You know?
So now with Rockdale and Yo with one loss apiece in district, I mean, what are we thinking about this Battle of the Bell? You know, it's not really for the district title anymore or anything like that, but
I think there will be a good crowd on hand.
most likely.
There might be a few people show up, you know.
Two good offenses, two defenses that are susceptible to giving up the big plays.
This will be
I mean, we could be in for a barn burner.
All I was going to say there was this will be the first time Cameron has played at Rockdale's new stadium.
With the turf, the rearranged, re-landscaped.
And, of course, last year when Troy beat him there, it was the first time Troy had played there. But, yeah, this is I don't know if any of us can really have a good feel for this game, who we want.
I mean, we know there's a ton of playmakers for each.
And that's kind of been true throughout the years.
Right.
I mean, it's just you think the guys have graduated and somebody else is there to come along and somebody just steps up. When these two get together, you know, it is about really the playmakers having big games. You don't expect this one to be like a 7-3 type battle.
No.
You kind of expect this to be a shootout from the start. But that being said, you never know what's going to happen.
I mean, it could.
Didn't they have like an 80-54 game?
And
a couple of years ago or something.
Yeah, three years ago. Yeah, Rockdale won 80-54. Rockdale won again 2017, 63-34 last year. A little more normal score there with Yo winning 33-14, but. I mean, going along with what Marcus said, you know, I talked to both coaches, Tommy Brashear for Cameron, Jeff Miller for Rockdale, and they both kind of just echoed the same sentiment that, you know, this game is going to come down to whatever defense can give up the fewer or the fewest home run plays, the big plays. Because, I mean, with explosive offenses on both sides, I mean, it's going to happen. It's pretty much inevitable. It's going to happen. But whatever defense can bounce back, you know, have a short memory, get back to work, and, you know, just come up with stops is really going to be key in this, as well as field position. You know, if one team is getting better field position, drive after drive, I mean, that's only going to be in their favor. So it should definitely be a high scoring ordeal. I think we can all agree on that. As far as who wins, I don't know who yet.
Better get there early to get your parking spot.
I'm just
Frito pie and all that stuff.
I'll go on a limb and I'll go ahead and say that I like Rockdale just because I think Cameron Valdez is the better running back in this game. And that may be the only reason. And I think if he gets over 100 yards like he should, then they'll probably win the game. If
The quarterbacks almost seem to cancel each other out. I mean,
yeah, that's the
both
thing. The
good,
quarterbacks, the receivers are all kind of
quarterbacks,
on
yeah.
the same level.
But here's
And they
here's
both
where I
given
would,
up a lot of points to Troy. So
Yeah.
that's
right.
pretty even.
Yeah.
Well, here's where I would counter. I'll play devil's advocate and go with Yo. You know, the Yo. I would give the passing game advantage to Yo, simply because I don't believe Rockdale's secondary is as strong as Yo's secondary. I know, Marcus, we both kind of agreed that Yo has had issues just making the tackles, making the basic plays, just to limit the big plays. I think they've kind of cleaned that up a little bit. It's hard to tell when you're playing a top team like Troy. That just makes a lot of people look silly. But I think Braden Brashear just has way too many weapons in the passing game with Kobe Young, Zakorian, Spikes, and then just a couple of other guys that I can't remember.
Thomas Melton.
Thomas Melton. Just too many weapons that you can consistently go to that I think have the experience and have the athleticism to really make plays against that secondary for Rockdale. I mean, Jace Robinson, Keyshawn Raven, and a bunch of other guys, they can put up points in the passing game just like the best of them. But if I had to give the edge in that aspect of the game, I would probably go with Yo.
And never underestimate the revenge factor in this game of wanting to grab the bell back from the other side. This doesn't stay on
With the game being in Rockdale.
Yeah,
So.
and this doesn't stay on one side of the rivalry very long. It's like one team might win 2 years in a row, but it's like it just goes back and forth recently.
Well, I mean, it's dead even.
You went back 10 years, right?
Yeah, and it's dead even at 5-5. So both sides have won it 5 times over the past 10 years. The scoring pretty even. Yo has scored 326 points over the past 10 meetings. Rockdale 275. So advantage Yeoman. But
Marcus, is this a top 10 rivalry in the state, regardless of classification? I mean, I would think it is. Don't you think?
I can't think of too many more that
Yeah.
really are up
Yeah.
there. I mean,
Well, and there's a symbol too. There's something
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
that
And they're
fighting
like,
for.
It's a
what,
tangible
10,
object,
10
yeah.
miles apart. They're in
Yeah.
the same county. It's gone back and forth. They both won state championships in the last, 5 to 6
Yeah.
years. And, I mean, they even had a rematch in the playoffs a few years back
Yep.
where
Yeah,
the team
14.
that won the regular season didn't win the playoff battle.
yeah,
So
that matchup in the playoffs,
Yeah.
I mean, it backed up traffic so bad.
good coaches, good fans that care, good athletes. So,
Well, and what's funny is just, and this will be my last take on this. When I was talking to Jeff Miller, he said that it's really funny with this rivalry. You've got two communities that are so intertwined and so close that for the majority of the year, outside of football season and definitely outside of Battle of the Bell week, most of the time these two communities are pretty supportive for other sports. So you got girls basketball or tennis or golf, whatever the case may be. Rockdale would rather see Yo do well and vice versa with other sports. But when it comes to football season and when it comes to this week Battle of the Bell, lines are drawn in the sand, and you know who you're rooting for, you know what colors you're wearing, and for this week you may be family, but if you're not wearing the same colors or rooting for the same team, you're definitely not allowed inside the house.
And a lot of that, I think we've talked about it before. Dan, you weren't here yet, but go back about a decade or so, and it wasn't always like that. I mean, these communities, there were people on each side that really didn't get along. I mean, it wasn't like total hatred, but a lot of what happened was when the Alcoa plant and Rockdale shut down, I mean, these two communities kind of had to come together just because a lot of people in Cameron lived there and it affected Rockdale. It was in Rockdale, so there was a lot more community bonding between them. But yeah, on Friday night when they get together, it's all war. But pretty much the rest of the week in other sports, they're cheering each other on, rooting for each other, and they want the county to succeed as well. I mean, not just both communities, but pretty much everybody in that county. It's just kind of a smaller, not very rich county.
Just how many really good football players in that
yes.
Yeah.
section right there over the years.
You say not that rich, but they got Dairy Queen in Cameron, and we don't have one in Belton, so they're pretty rich there.
But we'll go to ours in Harker Heights.
Okay.
Or go to Daniel's.
got one in
Swing
Cove.
by it on your way home.
It's right down the road from where I live. Greg, I'll give you my address so you
thanks.
can announce it.
Thanks, Daniel.
I think we need to discuss some of the Eagles
Eagles.
who we cover. We cover a lot of Eagles.
There's a lot.
Starting
Yeah,
with
we do.
Salado. 2 wins in a row now.
tied in a three-way tie for second in that district. Waco Connolly has clinched a spot, but Salado tied with Mejia and Fairfield at 2-1 in district. Salado's got Madisonville, which is 2-6 overall and 0-4. So Salado should help itself this week and just take care of business and get past Madisonville, because they have Fairfield after that, right? Or pretty soon after that, right? Coming up. I know that's one of their rivalry games. But anyway, Salado can obviously help itself out this week and stay in the top tier of that district. Bruce Valletta, we mentioned, 7-1 overall, 4-0 in district. At Moody this week, Bruce Valletta already has that coveted playoff spot. Now it's all about that district title.
On the northern rim of our coverage area, Moody, Bruce Valletta.
Having a good season up there, Bruce Valletta is. And then Rogers,
Eagles.
more Eagles.
Yes, a lot of Eagles.
Yes. 7-0 overall, 1-0 in district. They got the late start in district. But playing Lexington, which I mentioned way at the beginning of this, is suddenly 2-0 in district after going 0-6 during the non-district portion.
They're like Lazarus from the Bible.
They've scored 85 points and only given up 20 in their two district games, including a win over Clifton last week, which I know Greg was kind of surprised about just based on previous results. But Rogers, they have not bowed to anybody so far. Lexington beat them last year, but this Rogers team kind of sounds like it's up to the task in these big games this year.
Did anyone see this coming? Rogers being undefeated, 7-0. I mean,
I don't know about undefeated.
Probably a stretch. I think we kind of knew they'd probably be pretty good
because they've had. I mean, a lot of these guys. This is their third year. Yeah. Well, it's Coach Roden's third year, but he's had these guys now up on varsity for 3 years. A lot.
They're pretty battle tested just this year with the shootout with Academy in the opener, and then the Crawford game, right? Double overtime.
Yep.
Tough goal line stand to win it. So they've been in some battles.
And we've been talking about, Rogers can really show what it's about as they get into district. Going undefeated through non-district is one thing. Well, then when you go up against a team like Lexington, that's obviously been a pretty good team over the years. That really kind of is a good demonstration of what you've got going. So the Rogers Eagles have another chance to show that this week. Anything else? Granger Bartlett, we glanced over that. That's one of those close proximity games. Granger obviously has been the better team over the last few years. I think they've won 4 in a row in that, but that's on the heels of 3 wins in a row by Bartlett. So that's another one of those rivalries over the last 10 years that's kind of gone back and forth. Both towns have kind of gone through their things and their issues, but that's always a big game. Get a lot of people out there.
It's pretty shocking to see the malaise that Bartlett has been in for the last several years. When anybody who's been around here for a while can remember back to when Bartlett was like one of the kings of 1A football back then. 2A now. 3 state championships in the 90s. You kind of wonder how it could reach a point where they're averaging something like 7 or 8 points a game and they're winless, and it's pretty stunning. But then again, you flip it around. Bruce Valletta was known as one of the probably worst programs in the state for its level for a whole lot of years. Didn't make the playoffs for about 30 years.
32,
and now they're steamrolling people, and so it goes.
The drop down a division or a class,
of course,
certainly helped. And
some of my good memories of working here were me and Greg Rajan just kind of traveling with Bartlett all over the state. One of those championship years. Of course, Rajan's now the Houston Chronicle, watching some Astros baseball at the moment, and I'm sitting here on a podcast talking
Where have
about
you gone,
Bartlett.
Craig Agnew?
Come on, dude! It was 8-2 when we started.
It's
Whatever.
He's writing a sidebar about bad defense or something right now.
Jeez.
7th inning
so I'm
implosion.
lucky when
Woe
Greg.
is you. Come on, this is the best time we could ever have.
But no,
Rosebud also. They're a team that won a state championship in 2002, had a lot of good athletes, good coaching, and then you're looking now they're averaging less than a point a game. So
but I wasn't driving all over the state with Greg Rajan over them back then.
That's right.
I don't have a story about that.
Josh was in San Jose.
I was. Thank you. That's California.
Dodging earthquakes.
That's California.
All right.
I dodged an earthquake. A few of them.
Yeah.
I want to hear some leaders, man. I want to hear some leaders.
Well, hang on. Let me segue into that just real quick, please. I just want to let everyone know that there's a lot to look forward to this week as far as area games. I mean, a lot at stake. So we're going to have a lot to talk about next week on this podcast as well.
Big college game Saturday.
There is a big college game. UMHB hosting Hardin Simmons.
Oh, that one.
Yep. So I'm sure there'll be some people there.
We'll have Eric back on the beat for that one.
Yes. Greg
I thought you were talking about TCU in Texas.
Hey, every game is big to somebody.
Yep.
We don't speak for Marcus.
Except for
That's
me.
true. All right. Is it time for some stats?
Yep.
All right.
Marcus has been waiting.
Let's go.
As he hops on his cell phone to completely ignore you.
All right.
Just making sure he gets them right. I have them all here.
Let's hear some area leaders. So your area rushing leaders going into week 9. Nathan Quattlebaum out of Bruceville Eddy, 1,712 yards, 22 touchdowns on the season. Zach Rabachik out of Troy comes in at second, 1,424 yards, 21 scores. Clay Cooper out of Holland, 1,131 yards, 16 touchdowns. Cameron Valdez out of Rockdale, talked a lot about him, 1,067 yards, 19 touchdowns. Charlie Hudson out of Central Texas Christian, 1,033 yards, 15 touchdowns. And then Carlos Reyna out of Granger, he's capped the 1,000-yard mark, 1,004 yards, 17 touchdowns. And then next is Ruben Jimenez out of Belton. He's still got a little ways to go for that 1,000 mark, 763 yards, 9 touchdowns on the ground.
Oh. By the way, it's 11-2 now, Nationals.
Oh, why are you bringing me down,
3 more
man?
runs in the 37 minutes we've been.
Of course, the game will hopefully be over by the time y'all are listening to this.
At least it's not like Marcus's Cubbies a few years ago. I mean, the Astros did win the whole thing 2 years ago, so it's not like they're as long suffering
Hey,
as your
a little
Cubbies.
tidbit for you. The Astros are the only team in the history of baseball to win both the American League and the National League pennants.
Impressive.
And I will take that to my grave. Thank you, Marcus. That was beautiful.
You're gonna die soon.
So your I don't know how to
Podcast
lay out.
goes more than another minute or two.
It's true. All right, Hyperdrive. Your area passing leaders. Jace Robinson out of Rockdale, 1,767 yards passing, 26 touchdowns on the year. Braden Brashear out of Cameron Yo, 1,736 yards and 22 touchdowns. So we're going to see those two slingers go at it Friday night. Vance Willis out of Temple, 1,441 yards, 16 touchdowns. Trapper Enzor out of Bruceville Eddy, 1,298 yards, 15 touchdowns. Zane Spinn out of Holland, 1,249 yards, 13 touchdowns. And Ruben Jimenez again from Belton, 1,159 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, really kind of showing he's a dual threat kind of guy. So, Josh, you've seen a lot of him this year. So, Greg, I miss your comments. Any comments, Greg? We gonna have anything?
No comments.
No comments. Okay, that's what I like to hear.
All we need to say.
Yards receiving for the year. Keyshawn Raven out of Rockdale, 677 yards, 10 touchdowns. Braden Lilly, former athlete of the week from Academy, 660 yards, 5 touchdowns. Quentin Johnston out of Temple, 620 yards, 7 touchdowns. Kobe Young out of Cameron Yo, 606 yards, 9 touchdowns. Zachorian Spikes, also out of Cameron Yo, 563 yards, 6 touchdowns. And then wrapping it up is Joseph Crathers from Gerald, 481 yards receiving on the year and 4 touchdowns.